Are you wanting to get into Jane Austen, trying to read it, but you need a little bit of help trying to understand it? You could join a private book club with Frances. You set the timeline, you set the agenda. Through video calls, emails, chat with Frances, learn more about the story. And she's going to help you understand Austen. And you know what? That would make the world a better place.
Kia ora, welcome to this episode of The Image Austenite. I am Frances Duncan, author, Austenite life coach. My co-host is Emma Dunning,
House Hunter.
Ooh, House Hunter. And our canine co-host is Bingley. You might just hear him in the background occasionally jiggling around. Yeah, there he goes.
He's currently doing a downward dog.
Very appropriate. Today we're discussing chapter 15 of Sense and Sensibility. Willoughby fucks off. I mean, that's the major thing that happens. So Marianne and Willoughby have a quiet meeting. Everyone's out. They come home. Marianne's in floods of tears. Willoughby's like, I can't talk about it, and runs away. And Eleanor's like, this is pretty suspicious, right? Mrs. Dashwood's like, no, it's fully above board. Everything's fine.
Mrs. Dashwood is trying to believe that Willoughby's character is just as it appears, and that the marriage is going to go ahead and that everyone is going to be happy, despite some disturbing evidence to the contrary.
So we don't get to see the bit where Willoughby asks to see Marianne alone, but Mrs. Dashwood assumes that that's what's happened, and that's why Marianne's staying home from going to visit at the park. And she is perfectly satisfied with this. Should she be? Does this not sound dodgy? Should not Willoughby have asked her permission to see Marianne alone?
Yes, Mrs. Dashwood is Marianne's guardian, but he probably should have asked her closest male relative. He probably should have asked John Dashwood. And the fact that he hasn't should make Mrs. Dashwood suspicious. Mrs. Dashwood is expecting a proposal of marriage, and the fact that he hasn't asked permission should alert her that something is wrong.
She thinks they're already engaged, according to this chapter, even though, as Eleanor points out, it is wild that neither of them have specifically told Eleanor or Mrs. Dashwood that they're engaged, because they're very open people. They would tell. Apologies, there will be a lot of spoilers in discussion of this chapter. It's kind of necessary. Do you think that Willoughby did intend to ask Marianne to marry him at this point? He says later that he did, but I'm not sure if we can actually believe him, and whether this was him just continuing what he was doing or trying to get her alone to seduce her.
As much as you can believe anything that Willoughby says, I think he did intend to propose to her, in the knowledge that he can change his mind at any moment, and this is not the only reason that he might have changed his mind. I think he believed himself that that is what he was going to do.
So it was kind of convenient for him that what happened the night before happened, so he wasn't trapped in an engagement that wasn't going to be to his advantage.
That is correct. Well, not to his financial advantage. We can speculate what Willoughby's life would have been like had he married Marianne, and maybe it would have been a better life. We will speculate about that later, I feel certain.
One of the things that came up during the group read, some people were blaming his future wife for some of Willoughby's behaviour and some of the things that she potentially influenced him to do, and blaming Mrs. Smith, his cousin, aunt, not entirely sure of the connection, for the way that Willoughby's behaving. But what's really important is this is all the consequence of Willoughby's own actions, because Mrs. Smith kicks him out, spoiler, because she found out about Colonel Brandon's foster daughter and said, you need to marry this girl and make it right. And he said, fuck off, I want money, and left, because she is very clear about doing the right thing. One of our readers was comparing her to Mrs. Ferris being a controlling woman with money, but I think this is a very different situation. Mrs. Ferris does not want Edward to marry Eleanor or his current fiancé, which is why when he turns up, he's in a whole spin. But Mrs. Smith is talking about doing the right thing.
And we're to compare Willoughby's behaviour with Edward's behaviour as far as doing the right thing is concerned when you have made a commitment to someone, seeing it through even if it's unpleasant.
Because Edward would have married Lucy, even though he did not love her and it wasn't going to be good for him financially in many other ways. Whereas Willoughby, by his behaviour, has acted as though he's engaged to Marianne. So his faith is kind of committed, but he still leaves. And he never explains to her either. So yes, good comparisons. The Dashwoods, minus Marianne, have gone to visit Lady Middleton. Mrs. Dashwood's very careful about ensuring they maintain the back and forth of visits, that the Middletons are dining at the cottage as often as they're dining at the park, and that they visit as often, because that's the rules of society that Mrs. Dashwood was raised with. And even though she doesn't have the position or the home that she did before, she wants to maintain that, which I like. So Marianne is left alone and Willoughby turns up. When they return, Marianne doesn't even see them. She just rushes out in, it's called violent affliction, with her handkerchief to her eyes. Is she upset because Willoughby won't tell her why he's going away? Is it because he won't tell her when he'll be back? It's really confusing because it seems like later she's expecting him to turn back up all the time. Why is she so upset?
She was expecting a marriage proposal and he came and told her he's going away.
Oh, how had that never occurred to me before? Instead of, will you marry me, it's, I gotta go, bye.
Because you know that Willoughby is dastardly and Marianne doesn't. That's why it didn't occur to you.
Dastardly is an excellent word. He's also upset, but I'm not sure whether he feels the same as her or whether he's affected by her emotion. Just seeing her upset has upset him. Is he genuinely upset about having to go?
He saw himself marrying Marianne and he's upset that he is having to forego his passionate marriage to the passionate Marianne.
That sounds like it's very about sex.
Well, he thought he was going to have...
Yeah, love.
He thought he was going to have love and passion and Mrs. Smith's money. And now he knows he has to have one or the other, and possibly neither.
But he does make that choice. You could argue it's a selfish choice. You could argue that it was kind of him not to marry Marianne when they had nothing to live on, but he also should have communicated that to her.
We have a lot of Bingley rolling around on the carpet, scratching in the background there. Is that something we feel we want in our podcast?
It's very genuine.
It adds depth.
It adds depth. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There have been many episodes with Bingley and you can hear his collar jingling in the background. It's like Christmas bells.
He's very social. So this is basically an episode about Pride and Prejudice as well.
Because Bingley is Charles Bingley.
He is Mr. Charles Bingley, and he is a gentleman who lives in the moment and enjoys his simple pleasures.
I should point out that Bingley is not a golden retriever, as the character is.
No, that is true. He's a terrier, and Mr. Charles Bingley in the book is the opposite of a terrier. He doesn't hold on. He is not tenacious in the face of opposition.
We could just go through dog breeds and name all the different characters.
We absolutely need to do a podcast episode of dogs and Jane Austen, just matching every character to dog breeds.
Would you like to do a Sense and Sensibility, the characters as dogs? We can add it to the end. This is already going to be a very long season.
I feel like there's a Weimaraner in here for sure. And there are some little Bichon Free, like Fanny Dashwood might be a Bichon Free, or maybe Lady Middleton might be a Bichon Free.
I don't know enough about dogs, so I feel like Emma's going to do this episode and tell me about
I'll
these
explain the
different
characters
dogs.
of all the different dogs
And
to you.
we'll look at the pictures and then we'll like use AI to put Regency dresses on some of these dogs.
Oh, see, that's... No,
I know, AI,
that's
a bit weird.
anthropomorphism. It's not okay to do that to dogs. Even AI dogs.
Have you seen our logo? Or is it okay because the bird is dead, extinct?
Yeah, you can't harm either Jane Austen or the Huia.
Because they're both dead.
But we were discussing Mr. Willoughby and Marianne and the rapid departure of Mr. Willoughby. Mrs. Dashwood keeps offering to put up Mr. Willoughby should he come back to the neighbourhood. So I absolutely am not coming back to the neighbourhood for a year. Allenham's not the only place you can stay in this neighbourhood. Come and stay with us. She's not taking no for an answer. And Willoughby says, you are too good, which is a phrase used in other Austen novels. It means no. Have you noticed that before?
I have not. So it's a polite refusal.
Yes. Too good. But it's interesting that she would have him to stay in their tiny cottage. Like, that seems a bit saucy too.
Well, we know that Edward and Colonel Brandon do.
Yeah.
But she's a widow, so they're chaperoned.
Still.
That makes sense of the next line. He's looking at the ground. You are too good. Mrs. Dashwood looked at Eleanor with surprise. Eleanor felt equal amazement. For a few moments, everyone was silent. And now that makes sense because you are too good meant no.
Yeah.
So they're like, what is happening? Why? Mrs. Dashwood thinks it's because of Mrs. Smith and says to him, you only can judge how far it might be pleasing to Mrs. Smith if you come back to the neighbourhood and stay with us instead of her. And he uses the word engagements, my engagements at present. Interesting word choice, Willoughby.
It comes up later in the book as well, that double meaning of the word engagements to mean social engagements and marital engagement.
And it's Austen, so she definitely means the double meaning of it.
Yes.
This was intentional to make us think, because she's so good. Never has been her equal.
There's all this foreshadowing of exactly how selfish he is. He says, I will not torment myself any longer. He's thinking about his own torment.
Yes, all of this is about his feelings. I am now suffering under a very heavy disappointment, focusing on himself, not Marianne, who he's just devastated, and not clearly told her what's going on. The gentlemanly thing to do would have been to say, I don't know if I can come back, and somehow subtly slide in there, I know I've given you some ideas that our relationship is going to be of a certain level, and I don't think I can fulfill that promise anymore. However you subtly do that, I don't know. But he doesn't. So she still thinks that they're basically engaged because he's been acting like they are.
And all he said is, I have to go away.
And not said why. And it's the consequences of his own actions. Fuck that guy.
Eleanor is immediately uneasy, anxious and distrustful. Mrs. Dashwood is immediately trying to find excuses for Willoughby's behaviour. So Eleanor was fearing there had been no serious design formed on his side, like he never intended to marry her. And then she's wondering, have they had a big fight? But then she thinks, no, Marianne loves him so much. It seems impossible that they could have quarrelled.
It really shows the difference between Eleanor and Mrs. Dashwood's characters. That Eleanor's like, something smells wrong here, and Mrs. Dashwood is desperately grasping at straws, almost blaming Eleanor.
Yes, absolutely, she does. oh, Eleanor, how incomprehensible are your feelings? Like she is reproaching Eleanor for having doubts about Willoughby.
Has he been acting a part this whole time? Do you suppose him really indifferent to her?
Yeah, you had rather take evil upon credit than good. And of course, Eleanor is correct.
Willoughby does say that he is going because Mrs. Smith has sent him to London. And Mrs. Dashwood does catch on to that. I'm persuaded that Mrs. Smith suspects his regard for Marianne, disapproves of it, perhaps because she has other views for him, and on that account is eager to get him away. Interesting that she's making this assumption about Mrs. Smith when there are other characters in the novel behaving this way, but Mrs. Smith is not one of them. Fanny Dashwood and her mother, Mrs. Ferris, they are very like this, and it's treated that it's awful for them to be doing that, but here it's almost treated like a reasonable thing. I struggle with this, particularly because in the end, when Lucy marries Robert, it's all cool, even though she has no money and less standing than Eleanor. And she's uneducated and she's scheming. It doesn't seem to matter who a potential bride is, but what they are, except that Lucy somehow breaks all those molds because she's so good at manipulating. But Mrs. Smith wanted Willoughby to do the right thing and marry someone who was probably not the right girl. She didn't necessarily have the right standing, and she'd done some dodgy stuff. Fully his fault, not hers. She was a child. And we later find out that had he married Marianne, Mrs. Smith would have approved of that because she's a good, genuine person and she has a good standing. But you never know which character's motivation is what. They're assuming that Mrs. Smith wouldn't like Marianne because she doesn't have the money.
Yeah, it's a funny assumption because actually Mrs. Dashwood has never met Mrs. Smith, and as far as I know, she doesn't know much about her. We've not heard any conversation with the Middletons about Mrs. Smith.
No one sees Mrs. Smith. She's homebound, possibly bedbound. And one of the things that Willoughby talks about later is maybe she was a bit pissed that he didn't give her much of his attention when he was there because he was running around with Marianne the whole time. And yet you are there to see her. This novel has a lot of women pulling the strings and powerful women.
But they're seen as manipulative, whereas if a man pulls the strings,
it's perfectly reasonable. And I think Austen intended us to go, what?
Mrs. Dashwood really believes that all of Willoughby's looks and behaviour add up to a declaration of love and consideration of Marianne as his future wife, and has not my consent been daily asked by his looks, his manner, his attentive and affectionate respect? Have we not perfectly understood each other? She believes that his open behaviour is the same as asking permission to marry Marianne. So that is why she left them in the cottage together. She believed that that was the same as asking permission. She believed that he had asked permission.
But Eleanor is very clear. There is no excuse for his concealing their engagement. Plain and open avowal of his difficulties would have been more to his honour. I don't want proof of their affection, but I do of their engagement.
And then we have Marianne's behaviour when she reappears after her crying bout at dinner that night.
Without any desire of command over herself?
Yes, so it's super judgmental, I think, on Jane Austen's part here. Marianne was expecting a marriage proposal, has instead had the love of her life disappear for an unidentified time, and Jane Austen appears to have the expectation that she will have fortitude and that it's unreasonable that she should have a violent oppression of spirit, that she should have a desire to have command over herself just hours after this has happened, that when people mention anything to do with Willoughby, she can't tolerate it, and that everything makes her think of Willoughby. That seems to be a very natural response for a 17-year-old.
I agree. I wonder, though, if Austen is highlighting it here so much because this is actually how it continues for months and months. And there is a real difference between her and Eleanor and how they manage these difficulties. But a lot of that, yes, Eleanor is older, and also Eleanor's very aware of the rest of the family, and she's being considerate of their feelings, not making them more upset on her behalf. Mrs. Dashwood is already upset on Marianne's behalf. Why make everyone miserable when you can just be quietly miserable alone, I think is kind of Eleanor's motto.
Yes, certainly at this stage of the novel, just the way that this is phrased, this violent oppression of spirits continued the whole evening, as if the whole evening is too long for this level of reaction.
It's worse because she was without any power and without any desire of command over herself.
I just think the expectation that she would, that's a high expectation to hold for a 17-year-old who was expecting a marriage proposal.
That's a really good point, yeah. Later we learn that Marianne is behaving the way that she thinks is appropriate, that you should be this upset, that you should not be getting better, that you should not be sleeping, that you should be crying all the time. I think Austen is harking back to the death of their father. Yes. That Marianne was indulging and re-indulging, and her mother was as well. And maybe some of the snark might also be a little bit of Eleanor going, oh God, not again. Because she had to step up and be the grown-up while her mother and sister mourned her father. She didn't get to. I'm not sure she's gotten over that. So Marianne behaving like this, again, is probably a bit of a knee-jerk reaction on Eleanor's part to be annoyed about it.
Yeah, but are we hearing Eleanor here or are we hearing Jane Austen?
I don't know.
I think we're hearing Jane Austen. But is this going to change? Is Eleanor going to learn that, in fact, to express and share your emotions is desirable?
Some people would say that she does learn that in the course of the novel, but I'm not sure if she does. The problem being, because Marianne is so deeply afflicted continuously throughout the novel, that when it becomes Eleanor's turn to express her emotions, she again has to dampen them down because Marianne has another breakdown. Marianne's crying about the situation that Eleanor's in, so Eleanor doesn't even get a chance to grieve that herself because she has to be there for Marianne. And that sucks. It is unfair.
Yeah, I think as a reader, we are supposed to get the impression that this reaction is excessive.
Yeah. Also because what's appropriate to do in public and what's not appropriate to do in public, and if you're dining with family, it's still slightly kind of formal.
Well, it's all sort of stiff upper lip and the value of self-control.
Which comes in a lot more in later ages, like when we hit Victorian.
Well, it's also tied with religion. It's consideration for others. It's putting other people before yourself.
Oh, was Marianne not raised female? Come on. It's the first thing we're taught. Everybody else is more important than you. Sit down, be a good girl. Don't make waves. Yeah, it comes back to the feeding and encouraging it as a duty. And that's very definitely Eleanor's thought. She's saying that he was not acting like himself. It would have been more like him to acknowledge what was going on. He's not acting the way that he was before. It's like he's an entirely different character now.
That's because he has met with a difficulty. He can be charming and sunny when things are going his way, but when he meets with a difficulty, more of the flaws in his underlying character become apparent.
It turns out Mrs. Dashwood might be relying on the people around them for knowledge of Willoughby as well. He's no stranger in this part of the world. Who's ever spoken to his disadvantage? But do the Middletons have that much penetration? Do they speak ill of anybody?
Well, that's the point of reputation, isn't it? That's why reputation is so important, because that is how you judge people and make decisions which affect the rest of your life, is based on people's reputation. So you have to be very careful whose judgment you trust. Eleanor says, I love Willoughby, sincerely love him. I'm not talking about romantic love, but it's interesting to think that she had a good impression of Willoughby and was looking forward to a time when her sister would be happy married to Willoughby, and she loses that too.
I think it shows the depths of Willoughby's charm, that Eleanor, who's supposed to be the rational one, etc., can't see through him. Even though she does question things, she's like, no, but I do love him. And then later, when he turns up and explains himself, she almost gets sucked in again. He's so good at this. I'm sure that he could have given them a great speech here and left on really good terms had he wanted to. But it seems like maybe he's actually kind of pissed off that things haven't gone his way, so he's not putting in the effort he might have otherwise.
I think he's feeling genuine emotion here. That's why he's not as eloquent as he becomes later, and not as smart about how he does things.
Yeah, that's true, because were he being smart, he would have cooked up a much better story and left under better. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Dastardly Willoughby. And that is our discussion of Chapter 15 of Sense and Sensibility by Jane Austen. I have been Frances Duncan, this has been Emma Dunning, and Bingley,
who is now asleep.
Yay! Thank you for listening, and we wish you happy reading.